Yeah, that is one thing. Like the camera is definitely newer since you were last a regular.
Yep. No one has seen me before, maybe.
It's quite possible.
Yeah.
They wonder
So
like, does John really exist? Is he some sort of like AI creation? Like, it's
Could be.
yeah, we don't know.
Nowadays, we never know.
We never
yeah.
know.
But Jason, our streak of contributors and guests continues
Yes,
this week.
yes.
So this week, welcome back. It's been a while since you've been on, but it's great to have you back, Jon Narong. For those that have been listening for a while, John was a
Yeah, we need to add.
regular.
Have we
And
got the
gestures.
soundboard set up so you can hit the button with the applause and
I've
stuff like
tried. For some reason, Streamyard isn't liking it right now,
that?
so I'm still working on that.
Yeah, okay, fine. Well, applause anyways for John returning.
Yeah.
I'm bi-
I had some sounds set up and like I would hit them and you couldn't hear them nor did the recording pick them up.
Ah,
So only I could hear them. So it
well,
really didn't make
that's
much
lame.
sense if I heard all
Yeah,
the fanfare.
yeah,
Someone just has to make the sound.
yeah.
Yeah,
We'll do that in post.
exactly. But
Sorry, threw you off
so
your
for
game.
those that have been listening for a while, John was, part of the podcast in the very beginning. It was the three of us. And then John, you moved to Thailand. And so how long have you been living there? I know you're back in the US for the time being for a visit. So we thought we'd grab you while you're a bit more of an easier time to coordinate, or a much more friendly time to coordinate. But how long has it been since you've really kind of put down some roots in Thailand?
Yeah, appreciated that it's a similar time zone now. But I think actually I was in Thailand when I was on the podcast before. It's
He
been
was, he
about
was, yeah.
yeah, almost 6 years now. Actually, it's been quite it's gone by quite quickly. But yeah, back in similar time zone now in California. So it's nice to be back. And I noticed that this is podcast episode 265, I believe. I saw in your invite. So I must have been here about 250 episodes ago.
No, no, no. It was more recent than that.
Might have had a
Um,
guest appearance.
yeah, it was definitely more recent than that. But in the conversations you and I've had, with you being back in the U.S., I definitely wanted to grab you and have you join us for a bit. With your time in Thailand, living there, I was like, in those 6 years, I knew you've had to have gathered a new perspective. Found how things are different. Or maybe probably done differently, or things maybe we take for granted. That's what I'm really
Hmm.
trying to get at is in thinking through topics. I was like, there's got to be things that we here, based in the U.S., based in Europe, have a very centric view on or take for granted that maybe don't apply elsewhere. So wanted to
Hmm.
get your input there, and so today's topic, I've made it very, very broad. And you and I were talking a bit about it yesterday, and it's broad on purpose because I think we could take this several different ways. But what I wanted to get your thoughts on is like, what is digital marketing technology and the digital customer experience in Southeast Asia like? What are those things that we take for granted in the U.S. that are much different, and even to the point where maybe when it comes to digital marketing in the US, things that we do on the regular that may even be the complete flip side and be offensive in Southeast Asia. Just some things to kind of get us going there. But like I guess
Hmm.
let's start out with like in your time there, like what were some of the, like a better term, culture shocks that you ran into, especially when it came to digital marketing?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I think the best way to think about it is probably, yeah, taking a look on at how people really interact with technology and with their digital touch points, I guess, with different brands. Um, so whereas a lot of things where when we think about analytics in the U.S., it's very much web based. In Southeast Asia, it's very much app based. Um, it's I know we've all heard the term mobile first, but I think it's really taken to a whole nother level there. In many cases, big brands, even institutional things like banks, like sometimes their website will be very limited or almost non-functional, sometimes not even existing, and all the touch points are through apps for the most point. A lot of brands won't even have their own website. So things are very mobile first. And when we think of mobile first, I think the other big difference breaking that down is in the US, it's mainly iOS, but that's the opposite is actually true in Southeast Asia. A lot of times, I'm not up to date on the latest statistics, but it's more like 70 to 80% Android and 20 to 30% iOS. So that said, there's a lot more complexity around even understanding the nuances of app tracking, app analytics as well, because you're dealing with a lot larger swath of devices. So being mobile first, obviously one of the big applications is social, as it is here. Social is huge. I think Thailand is ranked among, and a lot of countries in that region, among the highest social media users in the world in terms of time spent. There's been a lot of innovative ways in the way people use social. A lot of social commerce happens. Um, uh, if you think of the way a lot of commerce is done in Asia, historically, even pre-technology, it's been around a lot of marketplaces, not really so centralized, and that's really kind of evolved into the digital landscape as well. So it's very easy for some individual person to set up a shop, um, like on Instagram, TikTok, even before the official social commerce features were introduced, to just kind of sell basically whatever. The barrier to entry to set up an online business is much lower, so you see a lot more of it. Uh, there's a lot of peer-to-peer kind of commerce happening. Um, Even unofficially, like Facebook groups are very active in Southeast Asia. People are very comfortable selling to each other. I think there's a lot of inherently there's more trust of other people, strangers online, if you will, like to transact, maybe more so than the U.S. Um, that does come with some pitfalls as well, as you do hear of more potential scams and things happening as well. So yeah, maybe we'll start there. Like I think with commerce overall, it's I think that generally, so it's a lot more mobile first. It's a lot less centralized. There are big commerce platforms. Amazon's not there, for instance. Like almost everyone transacts on Amazon in the U.S. There's a few other big players in that region. Lazada, Shopee are some of the Alibaba are some of the big ones. But even the way those function, a lot of times it's more smaller shops. It's not so centralized. They're more like marketplaces, actually, um, and that adds to some confusion when you're trying to shop for an item too. Whereas if you shop for a specific item, you might see many duplicate items from different sellers, all next to each other. Sometimes there's fake items, so there's a lot. It's a lot less. I don't know what the word is. Maybe less refined in that sense, but like there's a lot of options. There's a lot of opportunities, but it's definitely a little different on that
And,
front.
and just for clarification, when you say mobile first, are you
Hmm.
referring to mobile optimized web or native mobile apps or a
Hmm.
combination of the two?
That's a good question. So there's a mix, but I think actually for the most part it's more apps now. And overall, there's a lot of siloed touch points. Everyone tries to create their own walled gardens, and this actually I'm jumping on to some big topics here, but we can dig into any of these in a moment. But basically, what this has been creating is the notion of what they call super apps in Asia, where basically one company wants to do many different things. It's not like a single use kind of app. So an example, the number one app in Thailand is a communication app called Line, for instance. It's on the surface, it's something like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, where you can communicate with people. But you can also, it's also a place you can get news. It's a place you interact or follow brands. Get a lot of advertising. You can, there's an e-wallet functionality. You can buy your public transit tickets through this app. You can get promotions, coupons or whatnot from different merchants. So it does a lot more. That's one of the major apps. Grab is another one. Grab is like Uber here, where you can request rides and transport, but it also has an e-wallet functionality. So it seems like a lot of different um, unrelated functionalities that these companies are just trying to kind of pull all together to kind of create their own little ecosystems. Is it a little bit monopolistic? Yes, but that's also kind of the historically the way a lot of big business has been done out there as well.
And I want to just quickly mention the next episode I have planned for us is a deep dive into mobile first and what that means and what that how that actually affects digital analytics and marketing and whatnot.
I mean, you're not going to stop us from going
down.
No, just don't want you to have to repeat yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear you, but I do have one more question on this because I'm interested. So, because of this mobile first kind of way of thinking about it, do you see it, or in your daily life, do you see the mobile and brick and mortar experience more blended together than you do in the States, where there's more of a crossover, whether you're shopping, you're out doing an activity, you're paying a bill? Is there more of a kind of crossover between mobile and brick and mortar, or are they still kind of separate experiences?
I think in many ways there's crossover, but I guess the big difference is for a lot of the individual brick and mortar companies, they won't have their own their own domain, own website, their own app. They'll have a presence on one of these super apps.
Got it.
Like for instance, like in Line, they might have like that communication app I was talking about. There's the ability to have like a shop within there. So like a Shopify shop or something. Like, so you can have a shop within there. Everyone will have like a QR code to follow them online, communicate with them directly through that channel. So it kind of breaks the barrier of entry to having a digital presence. But it doesn't necessarily, and I guess there's a mix, because there are a lot of shops that are online only, but then we'll also have a kind of some physical location. The other thing which you see a lot more of in terms of brick and mortar are a lot of somewhat temporary shops or shop fronts. Like if you had a small business selling clothes, for instance, like you could set up that shop at a variety of different markets, that are just kind of commonplace in Asia. And then these markets might be temporary. There might be a market only for a weekend or a day, and you can have people that come through follow your online shop, and then you'll have like a more kind of loyal following. So they kind of interplay with each other in that sense.
Yeah.
A little bit.
What, from a data perspective, what are you seeing? What are companies doing different, maybe more innovative, maybe things that we don't think about here in let's just say North America, because I think even in Europe it's a kind of a different flavor as well. But what are you seeing in Southeast Asia from a data perspective that we're not doing here?
From a data perspective, well, one, I feel like there's a lot more for better or worse, I think there's a lot more opportunities to have very personalized experiences, and I say that because of the fact there's not as many privacy regulations or hoops to jump through as is the current environment here, or the rest of the world for that matter. Um, People seem to feel a lot more comfortable with like for instance, when I say if someone's able to follow a brand online or Facebook or whatever, I mean that's the same application you would use for your personal communication that you're giving to a company directly. So it feels like a little bit more intimate of a connection. Um, and from that, I think you're able to garner a lot more what would be considered private information here. So that's one thing. But there's also a lot of gaps because of the fact that a lot of things are on the apps, and a lot of times if you're not having your own um, your own website, your own presence, you don't have access to a lot of information sometimes as well. Sometimes you have to go through a third party, like
Understood.
Facebook or Line. So it's a there's in some ways it's a lot more complicated, I guess, because there are more touch points and there's unofficial touch points as well that people just generally feel okay. Like it would be more commonplace to just directly message or the owner of a company or
Yeah.
something instead of necessarily going through different channels. So things are kind of all over the place in that regard.
Do you think because it's so app centric that companies like Google, companies like Apple have not been able to use their influence to scare people into this privacy thing? I want to be careful on how I say this, and that I think that there's very real and important discussions to be had around privacy. I just don't think Apple and Google care. I think they're
Hmm.
using it for self-serving reasons, and they're kind of flooding the North American market to a bunch of uneducated people about this subject to get them scared. Do you think they've had less influence in Southeast Asia, and that's impacting some of kind of the data privacy discussions?
Yeah, I think I mean one thing I noticed when I came here was a lot of privacy focused advertising, like Apple's billboards about like iPhones being privacy first. I don't see that as often in in Asia. I think a lot of it has to do with maybe the um, yeah, the inherent trust some people have in kind of the peer to peer thing. I will say it is changing though, because I think, well, similar to here, you are seeing a recent uptick in scams, online scams, digital scams, that kind of thing. Um, so I think it will become more of an issue. But I think a big um, reason it is the way it is right now is that there hasn't been much education around uh, uh, digital privacy, like culturally, and it's a relatively newer phenomenon, I would say, even though it's mobile first. And I maybe to set the context too, like, you might think of if it's mobile first now, you might have thought that it was desktop first in the past, like that was the next step in the evolution. But actually, they kind of skipped over that phase. I mean, basically, the fact is most people do not have uh, their own computers outside of work usually, um, and many don't use computers for work as well. So, like a mobile phone is their only device that's connected to the internet. Um, and I think just because of that being kind of a newer phenomenon, there hasn't been as much history to really, um, you know, just be aware of all the things you should be aware of
Yeah.
in today's the state of how things are right now.
Because it's so app centric, has that had any kind of impact on the discussions around attribution? Because here in North America and Europe, there's a lot of freaking out about this ever shrinking, diminishing
Mm.
cookie lifetime. It really isn't an issue if we're talking apps. So has that altered how Southeast Asia companies look or think about attribution?
Oh yeah, attribution is definitely important. yeah, so now if we switch over to yeah, my work with bigger brands and in Southeast Asia, yeah, attribution is definitely a key concern. There's a little bit of a, I guess, more of an understanding that it's very difficult in the current state. I mean, there are a variety of mobile app attribution vendors, um, which are great, but I think the currently are hitting different technical limitations on just what they're able to do, because of all the developments in iOS and the Android side as well. Um, so I think the truth is there are a lot of holes around that. Um, yeah, it's a difficult one that we're always currently trying to be creative around. Um, but yeah, I don't know if I have a true answer. It is concerning, I think, how that seems to be going away. So we're just, yeah. I think it's, I mean, it's the same challenges as here. It's just with the unfortunate truth that we don't really have. I mean, we even have less of the website of attribution, which was a little
Yeah.
bit cleaner in the past. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of, maybe it's one of those things where it's yeah, you don't even miss it because you never really had it so much. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is a whole, and it's yeah, it's somewhat of a concern, but it's I think because of that, there's maybe not as much of a focus on attribution, maybe because a lot of marketers weren't used to having so much data, so it's a lot more around loyalty and retention. I think the key for any app experience is to get uh, a user's login contact information as soon as possible, even if it's anonymous. Just kind of have some user ID to track them throughout their life cycle, and try to look for signals to help them stay engaged
Yeah.
and loyal.
Um, so here in North America and Europe, we've gone through lots of different hype cycles. I think back in the day it was heat maps, and then it was optimization, and then it was CDPs, and then it was session replay, and then it was CDPs again, and now it's session. Did those same trends kind of play out in Southeast Asia, or do they have their own kind of hype cycles as far as what these companies are looking into from a digital marketing customer experience stack perspective?
Yeah, I do see it more in terms of the the platforms that apps are developed on as well. Um, it seems to be going back and forth between, well, there was a lot of more completely native app experiences, but now it is actually transitioning a little bit towards more like what they call like progressive web apps. Um, I believe it's a Google uh, technology or terminology. Basically, it's a kind of a hybrid approach to apps where there's some native, like the framework is more native, but the content is more web based, and they're kind of brought together. That also makes a lot of tracking very complicated as well. Um, it's almost similar to the iframe concept on webs, but more on the app side, where you have yeah, multiple technologies kind of working together. So that's definitely one of the tracking challenges, I think, with those experiences. From an analyst perspective, it would be a lot easier if everything was native app. Um, but when we come into hybrid technologies, it gets a lot more difficult.
Um, what does the personalization landscape look like in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities for personalization. It's I think I mean, it's a very important type of thing. I mean, so the big cloud vendors are in Southeast Asia as well, like Google and Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud. So we have those technologies available. Uh, Sometimes you see a lot of bigger companies trying to invent the wheel themselves as well. Sometimes there's a little bit of um, what's the word? Fatigue, I think, of always using companies from abroad for to rely on some of these technologies. So there's a want to some degree to kind of build your own, but sometimes that goes back and forth as well, because there's obviously a much higher barrier there, and there are some great technologies existing. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of resources dedicated to personalization, and a lot of ability there as well. I think some of the complications with some of these tools for Thailand specifically are Thai language as well. So some of these, a lot of these platforms are built really with English first in mind, and that works to some degree. But for a lot of specific or kind of localized, regionally localized content, it's some of those tools don't work as well either in the current state. I think they're improving quite quickly, but yeah, I think one thing we do forget about in the U.S. is that a lot of those vendors are really made for just assuming like English is the language that we're tracking.
Yeah.
And actually, that brings up another point with tracking in general. Like it's great that all the analytics tools now have support for Unicode characters and other languages, but in general, it gets there's a lot of decisions that have to be made when you're tracking things as well, to in what language they should be tracked in. Um, in the case of a lot of content or commerce sites, we might have two different values, like an English value and a localized language value. Um, and it's like, which one do you track? How do you track both? Does it uses another dimension, with an already limited set of available dimensions? So there are some architectural decisions to be made on that front as well, that can be quite complicated.
Got it. I'm curious if there's a unique flavor of analytics platform that tends to be the, I guess, Kleenex or Xerox or whatever the terminology is for Southeast Asia. In North America, it tends to be, it seems, historically been Google Analytics. In
Hmm.
Europe, I think it's historically felt like it's been Piwik, which I think is now Matomo. Is there a Matomo or a Google Analytics of Southeast Asia, or is Google Analytics the default choice there?
I would say in Thailand it's Google Analytics, but there are some. It's interesting because so in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of business being done with China directly, um, and it talks of expansion into the Chinese market, which may, at least especially currently, is not so common in the U.S. or possible. And China has a lot of restrictions around using American-based analytics tools like Google Analytics, which I believe is not allowed. So there are a set of tools, um, like for instance, Huawei makes they have a cloud that's almost identical to Google Cloud. It's a clone, basically. Um, I don't know if I should say that, but it basically is. They have a clone of like Google Analytics called Huawei Analytics. There's a like a they have an equivalent of Google Tag Manager. It's almost the same, um, but kind of run under a different uh, you know platform that's based out in China. So it does come up sometimes whether in Southeast Asia they should be using those platforms, or something more globally standard like Google Analytics. Um, Up to now, it's Google is still the standard, but I do see that as something to probably watch into the future. If the those if the world takes the opposite direction of globalization. So yeah,
It is
that
is. Oh, sorry. Go finish your thought.
oh, I was gonna say, yeah, that I mean that's yeah, it's that would make things a lot more complicated for sure.
Yeah.
And I think just in general, yeah, when there are barriers like that, and I mean, even to some degree in general, the a lot of the privacy regulations globally, I do I am a little bit nervous about that looking into the future. I think just with things being so siloed.
Does Southeast Asia have a strong vendor agency landscape primarily focused on digital marketing technologies, or are those being imported from Europe and North America?
There are some agencies, for sure, um, but in terms of the bigger players, they are currently all international. That at least that I'm aware of. Um, I do know of some smaller boutique agencies that are regionally based. There's also some international agencies that are trying to build a, you know, more regional presence. I think that's more the common path. Um, I think it does seem to be a growing part. The more local players. I think in general. I mean, if and I mean no disrespect to anyone, but like I think generally the level of experience has been less mature in Asia recently, but that's quickly changing. I actually see the rate um, of improvement growing very quickly. So I think that will definitely change in the near future. But currently, it's still a lot of international um, based agencies, I think, providing support.
What's something that you've learned in this app mobile centric environment that has given you a different insight or maybe a different perspective to view customer experience by that would be helpful for us to maybe force ourselves into that lens in North America, where again we tend to be more desktop focused first?
I think overall, I think one thing that potentially that is easier on mobile is just the idea of direct communication. I think maybe because we're somewhat natively just used to that. Like if we want to, you know, if we're talking internally or if we're talking to family or friends, it's very easy to text someone. And I think in Asia, a lot of times it's very easy to text um, or or call, however, whatever you may want to do directly to a company. And for some reason, that seems a lot more difficult to do here. There's a lot of hoops we always have to go through, whether it's finding clicking way deep into a help center to find a link to get an email or something. And a lot of times we'll circumvent it by trying to maybe tweet them or something. But it just feels a lot more like customer service might be um, or just the ease of of getting a human to talk to you is a lot lower there. And I think sometimes we may forget about that in terms of, I mean, or it comes at a cost of trying to scale very big, I think,
Yeah.
in North America.
Well, and sadly, that's by design, right? And whether
Yeah.
it's scale or it's margins, it's hiding the support of being able to connect directly with the brand is 100% by design that
hmm
they don't want to connect with their customers. And
Yeah. So I think that even if the experience is not as advanced, through the technology, I think just being able to talk to someone when you need to is goes a long way. Like if you wanted to, if there was some seller selling anything, and you could even think of another example. I mean, you can order fruit like directly from a farmer or something. A lot of them will have an online presence. Like you can just talk to them, say you need, a box of mangoes, and then it can be shipped to you directly, very easily, without having to sign up for some subscription or go through some major hoops. So I think at the end of the day, some of those things are just, it just really feels like it's more of a tool to contact the the sellers, the producers, the makers directly. Um, instead of going through such tremendous hoops. And I am jumping between like small business and large business, I realize, but that's the other thing too. I think you do end up dealing with a lot of smaller business. I mean, that's just the different business landscape, I think, out there as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting, I think, as we see prices continue to rise, but the experiences that consumers are having with brands continues to deteriorate. I think we're going to hit a tipping point where consumers are going to demand a better experience, and a lot of that better experience is having direct connection with humans and with the brand to be able to curate a better experience. So I think it's something that we need to be prepared for. I, I want to say that we saw that a little bit with Jim, the brand we worked with in the UK, Curry's. I want to say that they incented people to interact with the brand. I can't remember the story that I was hearing about the people in the stores with the iPads that are trying to curate a better experience. So I think even at large brands, people that are thinking future backwards are thinking that way, even if it's hard to scale, right?
Yeah, in their particular case, they were trying to get away from using the term omnichannel in a very cliche way. They really wanted to be able to have the website for those people that knew exactly what they wanted, what they needed. They can make a purchase and have it either delivered or shipped to a store for pickup. But then they also um, were trying to work on the website in create such an experience for those people who are unsure to entice them to come into the store to speak with someone who was an expert in that particular category of devices. And those individuals carried around a tablet with a version of the store called Store Mode, so it could the help them build a bundle for the customer out of both store inventory as well as maybe stuff that had to be shipped to the store. So in this case, the customer got a great experience with someone who helped them find the right collection of products to suit their need. And then it also presented the company with an opportunity to set up their store associates to be able to cross sell, upsell, and whatnot.
It's such a cool thing, and a stark contrast to what we see here in North America, where it's don't talk to us, go read documents on our website, go into the store and look at stuff, but you can figure it out. It's just it's such a stark difference between those models.
That does remind me of another difference, slightly different topic, but slightly related. So when you're talking about commerce, any kind of transaction online, the other demographic difference I think is that a lot of consumers don't have credit cards necessarily. So because of that, there's a lot of different payment options that are made available. A lot of people will choose to pay with cash. So you can choose cash on delivery many times. Like I don't think it's as common in the US anymore. But another kind of method that a lot of that some merchants will use is you can actually pay through counter service, like through so like at 7-Eleven, for instance. 7-Elevens are very prevalent in Southeast Asia, like every block kind of thing. It's very common to
And
be
they're
able.
amazing compared to what we have.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I follow a guy on YouTube that like goes and has these incredible dinners at 7-Eleven. I'm like, dude, this is awesome. Sorry.
Yeah, but so what you may not know is that you can also pay bills at 7-Eleven, and pay for, like, if you buy airline tickets, you can pay for them. So on the digital experience will be to like kind of reserve the ticket, but it's not finalized until you actually pay, and you can pay at a 7-Eleven when you're checking out. You show them a QR code of completely unrelated, like from a different airline, um, AirAsia as an example. You can pay for your tickets while you're, buying a bottle of water or something. Um, and because of that, I mean, that yields to other kinds of cross-sell opportunities as well. Obviously for 7-Eleven, not for the airline, but yeah, that's another completely kind of unique experience, I think, that you wouldn't find here necessarily.
So how do you deal with that data, right? If we're not trying, right, it seems like you're and that
Yeah.
7-Eleven example seems to go across a lot of these examples where the transaction It's
happens
happening
somewhere
on
else.
someone else's platform.
Yeah. So I mean, in the digital experience, it's going to be broken. Obviously, the funnel, like you can only know up to the certain point. So in those cases, yeah, there's a lot more data gathering from third parties. If you're offering all of those options. So yeah, payments can get very complicated because there's a lot more payment options. In addition to paying over counter, there's also a lot of um, e-wallets, that functionality. I think it's again related to the fact that not everyone has credit cards. So a lot of these super apps I was talking about also have like a built-in wallet functionality where you can top up cash to have like a digital wallet on your phone. Um, so keep in mind, because no credit cards, there's no Apple Pay either. Really, Apple Pay is not a thing in Asia, but cashless is a thing. So like you are paying with your phone, but not through Apple Pay. You're either
Yeah.
paying through one of these digital wallets, um, or the other way that's very common is you can do a direct transfer from your bank, similar to like maybe Zelle here, but there's actually, that's one thing that Southeast Asia has a standard from all the banks. There's a standard uh, payment gateway, like through QR codes.
Hmm.
So that's one thing where you don't need a third-party app. Actually, you from any bank, anyone with a bank account can transfer to anyone else with a bank account very easily, and a lot of times you'll do that. When you're transacting shopping as well, you can even do it online, where like one of the payment options will be paid by QR code. There'll just be a QR code on your screen. You can just do it from your phone. So yeah, those all make it very complicated to do a holistic funnel in analytics. But it adds to the fun, of course.
Yeah. I'm wondering if an unintended output of this is if you see digital data less siloed than we see here, because it's not like you can really go and do an analysis in Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics. It's got to be in some larger data store.
It's
Does
true.
that tend to be the default?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Maybe one I didn't even consider because it seems so commonplace. But yeah, absolutely. Like in Asia, for the clients that we've worked with, it's impossible to get a complete view of payments and transactions directly within the analytics tool. Yeah, we're always are bringing in multiple data sources together, and we do have to create some custom solution for that. Yeah, it could very well be an opportunity for another 1,000 Martech vendors, but but yeah, that is definitely a pain point currently. We do have to bring in a lot of sources together
Yeah.
and try to pop it together somehow. But it's yeah, it does get quite complicated. No easy solution. Or if
Yeah.
anyone knows an easy solution, please let me know because it's been quite
I'm
complicated.
not sure that one exists. Yeah, it sounds incredibly complicated, but again, I think one of the positives coming out of it is that it forces you to think more broadly about your data strategy
Hmm.
right out of the gate, rather than just saying, oh, we'll compartmentalize our strategy based on the tool. You just don't have that
Yeah.
option there. So I think that that's a net positive.
Yeah, and I think it also is a great opportunity as well because I mean, is everything figured out or perfect now? Absolutely not. But uh, yeah, I think I see great potential in ways we can help improve that or into the future. But yeah, it's something we're actively trying to work out.
Yeah.
And I think it's something difficult for um, a lot of companies. I think any you know North American based retailer that wants to expand to that region just has to be prepared for a lot more complexity around payments in general.
Have you found with your time in Thailand that it's made you a better analyst? Not necessarily because you're thinking about things from a different geo
Hmm.
perspective, but just forcing you to think differently about data in general.
Yeah, I think so, actually. I think because of the fact you can't necessarily rely on out of the box reports for most things. that you really have to think about or remember, what you're doing something for, the intention of what the stakeholder is really trying to look for, or what you really need to know to try to optimize a business problem. Um, so we're constantly looking at that. One thing that I think we pay a lot more attention to is a lot of failures or errors too in the process. Like we really try to get as much information about where people are getting stuck for whatever information or data set that we have. Um, we definitely have to understand all of the data sets a lot more because of that kind of trying to merge everything together. Um, I think because of just the way things have been kind of set up for those reasons we talked about, like the individual marketplaces. Um, but it's interesting because I do see that trend kind of starting or in progress now in the U.S. as well, where things are becoming more siloed, and we're kind of having to piece things together
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Also, so in that case, yeah, I feel like I have had good experience with being able to to take things apart and put them back together a little bit more.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Um, but it's messy.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's
The world is
no.
messy. It's just a
Yeah,
reflection of
that's
reality.
true
So
too.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true too.
What's kind of the sphere of influence of Southeast Asia from a Martech perspective? It sounds like obviously China has a lot of potential influence and impact there. Do you
hmm
also reach out to the Pacific, or is that a different? I mean, because we tend to lump Asia Pac together, but is Australia, New Zealand, is that a completely different geo from how you're viewing things in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I think. I mean, in terms of vendors and things, I mean, we are probably looking at Australian-based vendors a little bit more because of the similar time zone. However, in terms of commerce and behaviors, I think Asia's more separate from Australia, because I think the Asian consumer is a little bit different than the Australian one would be. Um, but I mean, that said, it is becoming somewhat globalized. But um, yeah, I feel like it is still a little bit different. It's like I said, I think there is starting to be some fatigue on always relying so much on the
Yeah.
Western companies for technology solutions. However, and it was more troublesome in the past because up until recently, like for instance, like Google Cloud didn't have a local um, data center. I mean, they recently opened one up in Thailand, which helped a great deal. But the other thing that's they always have to deal with or think about more is the latency as well when you're
Yeah.
dealing with cloud services between just the geographic location. So some of those are being solved for. I think there was a little bit of a hole for a while too, in trying to build something um, more regionally based. I will say that Southeast Asia is one of the fastest growing regions for digital technology. So
Mm.
it's definitely still a developing market, but there's um, they're starting to build the right environment to to create a more innovative environment. So hopefully we'll see a lot more progress in the near future.
Jim, you know what might be fun? And my friend Ben down in Miami says he's a huge fan of the podcast. We'll see if he made it this far into this episode. He'll text me and tell me he heard his name and he's down for it. But it might be cool to see if he would come on. He's a Kiwi, and see if we could do a conversation between him and John to talk about the differences and similarities between Asia and the Pacific. I think that would be a really cool episode.
Yeah, yeah. Connect me with them,
No, no,
and
no.
I
He's got to
will.
reach out. He's got to reach
Ah,
out to
I
us,
see
and
what
then
you're
I'll
doing.
connect you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Ben, if you're
Reach out to
listening,
me.
text, reach out, let us know that you think it's a good idea. All right. Jim, do you have any
Absolutely.
questions? As always, I tend to hog the mic here. Do you have any follow up, last minute questions for John?
No worries, no worries, John. It's been great, chatting with you again on the podcast. I have one question for you.
hmm
what's been the biggest adjustment you've had to make with the work that you do? Um, like what has maybe created presented you the biggest challenge, or yeah, like I mentioned, like what's the biggest adjustment you've had to make?
I think probably more not so much technology based, but I think more just the communication. Um, I think in terms of, I mean, similar to what we all experienced. I mean, communicating with stakeholders and the clarity of that tone. But I think uh, the one difference is probably just goes back to the fact that it's a little bit newer of a space. I think in Southeast Asia, so. Um, there's occasionally a lot of conversations that I have that maybe the rest of us forgot about like, maybe the difference what a session is or or things like that as well sometimes. There's a lot more frequent education, a lot more training type of sessions that we need to have. There's and it's I think everyone kind of absorbs the knowledge very fast, very quickly, and learns very quickly. But the truth is, I think they haven't had exposure to a lot of it in the past. So in that sense, there's a lot more of the educational aspect. I think that goes along with it that I've gotten used to, and I think just really um, learning to kind of speak more clearly about some of the core trends that we're seeing, and helping to really close the gap between um, you know seeing what the anomaly or the trend in data might show, and then what we could actually do about it. Kind of helping to bridge that the entire way. So generally, I think just more of the kind of the hand holding per se, but it's yeah, nothing. It's just more due to the fact that I think the space is a little bit hasn't had time to mature as much yet.
Mhm.
But from what I've seen, everyone's extremely enthusiastic to learn more. So I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more from this region in the near future.
Interesting, yeah, very very interesting perspective on that.
Hmm.
Because I was kind of assuming you might go with maybe something more hard skill based, like had
Mm,
to adjust this or get familiar with this particular tool or had to adjust the way I use this particular tool, and instead
yeah.
it was all soft skill based,
Oh yeah. I think it's more
approach
soft skill.
and
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool then. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Like I mentioned earlier, um, have you back for the next couple episodes while you're still here in the U.S. And the next one, I definitely want to dig into that mobile first.
Okay.
Um, Definitely, like I like how you kind of were telling us the the cause for that. So it's a bit of a teaser for the next episode. The cause being everyone kind of they're jumped from you know, jumped over the desktop phase right to the mobile phase. So yeah, I'm
Hmm.
interested to hear more and in this case too, also what adjustments you had to make in your day to day in your approach when it comes to the mobile playing that kind of role.
Cool. Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure. I'm happy to be back in this crew.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So, all right, let's go ahead and wrap up there for this week and talk to everyone later.
See
All
ya.
right.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye.